Hey everyone, welcome back. Another episode of Talking Success, and this is one I've really been waiting for, as is my team. I'm super excited today. We're going on a different sort of journey on the whole sort of fintech path, and I'm joined today by Dawie Roodt, and I hope I pronounced that right, Dawie. As I said to him just before we came on, Afrikaans is clearly not my first language, so if I mispronounce anything, I apologise in advance, and that's to everyone else that's listening as well. Dawie, great to have you on board. I'm sure you don't need an introduction to most of our audience who probably seen you on TV for the last X amount of years. But for those who may be tuning in from overseas, I know we've got listeners in Kenya and Ghana and Nigeria and the US and the UK. Would you mind giving a quick intro in terms of you and what you've been doing and kind of what you're up to these days? And then we can kind of dive in.
Well, I guess thank you very much for that intro. Maybe my claim to fame is that I've been fired twice in my life, um, and the reason why I became an economist is because it was the only subject I could pass, really, kind of. And then I was forced to start my own business about 20 years ago, and a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, we eventually established a company called the Efficient Group, which is a financial services company. And today we are responsible for about, 300, 400 billion rand in various forms.
Wow.
And we have, I think, 600 people more or less working for us. We've got something like 70 branches right through South Africa. And yeah, so there you have it. So it's a good thing having been fired because that really forces you to concentrate on a couple of things. And I concentrated in starting this business. And today I think we've created a really, and I'm very proud of the business that we've built, the Efficient Group. Within the Efficient Group, we do a lot of things. I'm supposed to be, I'm a director of the holding company and a couple of the other subsidiaries within the group. And I'm also responsible for economic research. Being an economist is the best job in the world. I can promise you that, because nobody knows what I'm really doing, and I can really decide what I want to do. But it is a wonderful topic, and economics is about one thing only, and it is about people, and that's what you have to understand. You're going to probably ask me to make a prediction about A, B, and C, and I'm going to try. But that's not the job of an economist. The job of an economist is to try to figure out why people do certain things. So that's more or less in a nutshell what I do.
Amazing. Listen, Dawie, I do my research as well prior to coming on sort of these podcasts, and I understand you've got a keen interest in a certain element of marine biology as well. I read in your profile. I'd love to find some common ground there, but unfortunately, I can't. The only claim to fame I have in the world of sort of marine biology, according to my fisherman friends, is that I have the record of catching the ugliest fish in South Africa, and I'm going to try and post a picture here as well. So I'd love to find some common ground, but I can't. Neither can I find common ground on kind of your marathons and your feats of athleticism, because I'm not one for the great outdoors.
Okay.
But maybe that would change
Can I
as time goes
Can
on.
I say two things about that? Can I first of all let me show you
Of
something
course.
now? I know this is quite unprofessional, but let me show you that. That is that's my fish tank in my
Oh
in my
wow.
office.
Okay,
That
for
is a
those who are
6,000
listening
liter fish tank.
on YouTube, on Spotify or Apple, Davey's just showing us his quite incredible fish tank, which looks crystal clear. And having been an owner of a fish tank once before, I know that's not easy. So these things
And
deteriorate quicker than the rand plummets. But we'll talk about the rand plummeting in a minute. But anyway, yeah. So that was that's
and
the marine biology side. But you've clearly been massively into sort of fitness and athleticism and
can
marathons
I
and
can
decathlons
I say
and what
something
have you
about
as
that as
well. Did
well?
that come about sort of at an early age? Or?
Yeah, no. Let me tell you
Please,
something
yeah.
about that as well. And I'm not a good athlete. I'm not a good athlete. But the reason why, and I've done a lot of marathons and Ironman and all sort of cycling events and so on. And the reason why I do these kind of things is not because I'm such a good athlete, but the reason why I try these sort of things is because I want to see if I can do it. And that's part of my life philosophy. And that is try stuff that you don't think you will be able to do, and you will be amazed on what you can achieve. So don't for one single moment hang a label around my neck and calling me a good athlete. I'm certainly not a good athlete, but I certainly do try stuff. So I do marathons and I do all these kind of things, but I never win. Take my word for that. But at least I tried, and I always surprise myself in actually completing these events.
It's not about winning. It's about taking part, isn't it? So that was a bit cheesy,
That's
but
it.
anyway, that's a bit cheesy. Dawie, thank you. Let's. I just want to, before we sort of go into some questions, you kind of started and made a very interesting point. Economics is about people. Um, Being a layman, I would have thought that economics is about money. But clearly that's not right, and you have a different view. Could you just explain that, what you meant on that
Yeah,
side?
I can give you many examples, but let me give you one example. I've got a friend of mine. She recently completed a PhD in economics, and the subject was about happiness. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about inflation or financial markets. It was about happiness. And she measures happiness. And she devised and put a lot of stuff together. And she can actually measure. And this is quite an established um, uh, branch of economics, the measurement of happiness. Now, why is that important? I looked at the index of happiness and I tried to see if it correlates with things like, for example, what happens on the JSE or what happens on
Hmm.
a capital market. And it was actually amazing to see there's quite a strong correlation. And remember, when you talk about the financial markets, about the JSE or the equity markets or the capital markets or whatever, or the forex markets or any one of these things, there are people behind those markets making decisions. And people make decisions because of a number of reasons. Let me give you one example. I remember in my days when I was still trading on the capital market, and we played cricket. Literally, we played cricket on the capital market, on the floor. We were trading capital market instruments, and we watched cricket as well. And when when the team did well, the capital market reacted positive to that. Can you imagine? So it is not about the reason why economists use formulas and graphs and all these numbers and things is because we use those as tools to understand people better. And in the end, it is only about people. And it's sort of these measurements that I prefer. For example, people would look at things like, for example, what is the income of a country? What's the per capita income of the country? And I prefer to
Yeah.
look at things like, for example, what is the life expectancy in a specific country? Because there's a very strong correlation between life expectancy and everything else that is good. So in a wealthy country, people get old. In a wealthy country, people get old and they have good medical services, good education services. They've got low levels of crime and everything. And that's what it really is about. It is not about numbers. It is the numbers we sim, and that's a bit of. I criticize professors in economics. There's another branch of economics called econometrics, which is just mathematics and statistics, which is all good and well, and there's certainly a place for that. But my criticism is that quite often a professor in economics think of economics as an exact science. It is not. It is about people. And if you really want to understand economics, go and ask a professor in economic history. They really understand economics because they could see where it came from and how it evolved over time. So yes, it's only about people.
So you mentioned happiness. What are the other sort of um, how would you describe that as sensations, feelings, or sentiments that affect things like the JSE or other markets? Is it things like confidence? Is that one? What about sort of elements of political unrest that obviously we've seen
Okay.
happen so many times in so many different countries? There's obviously lots of different factors that influence what happens in capital markets. Is there other things, that other measures that perhaps people wouldn't even think of or
Yeah.
contemplate that have an effect?
We don't have that much time because I would love to tell you a wonderful story, but let me give you one example. At the
Please.
moment, we are in a relatively high inflation environment. The South African Central Bank has recently been increasing interest rates. Now, if we have a lot of confidence in the South African Central Bank, and we really trust the South African Central Bank. And the governor of the central bank, he goes on TV and he says, listen, you guys, inflation is a problem, but I'm going to make sure inflation falls to X, level X, wherever. And if we really trust him, I promise you, the next inflation number is probably going to be a little bit better than the previous one. Inflation will come down simply if the trusted central banker says so. So that is a very important driving force in people making, let's call it, economic decisions, because they if they have confidence in something, they will actually act. And a very important reason why the South African economy is where it is at the moment is that people are just not trusting this government. People just do not have confidence in South Africa's economic future. And if you don't have confidence, then you don't invest. And if you don't invest, then your economy simply doesn't grow. So confidence is perhaps one of those very, very important things. And many other things, of course, as well. People, fear is another important one.
Yeah.
Quite often they say the financial markets are driven by greed and fear, and I've seen that. I mean, quite often what happens, you see that a certain market goes completely ballistic. It quite often happens in the property market. Property prices will just go up and go up and go up, and everybody just wants a property because property prices keep on going up. And there's no stopping to this. And then one day the bubble bursts. So everybody was chasing this greed thing. And then one day the bubble bursts, and now nobody wants property. And property prices collapse, and the economy goes through the recession and blah. So there's a cycle. People, sometimes they all run together in a crowd trying to get this next new wave of wealth creation. And quite often people run away because they're scared of the collapsing financial markets and so on. And that is another job of an economist, to try to look through all these emotions and to really understand what is going on, and to give the actual underlying message to people, and to tell people, don't be scared, don't be greedy, try to understand. That is what's important. And that, I think, is also an important job of an economist.
It's a good segue onto kind of another question that I was maybe going to say for later, but let's talk about that now. We talk about market sentiment, we talk about greed, we talk about sort of opportunism, and then we sort of put the word crypto on top of that. What is your view as an economist on crypto? We're not talking about specific coins here. We're not giving any
Yeah, yeah,
financial
yeah.
advice whatsoever. But what's your view as crypto as an industry?
Yeah.
The prospects of it and how it will affect economics in a country.
Okay, I just want to make a side comment, and that's about greed. I'm all for greed. I think greed is good, just by the way. But okay, let's have a look at cryptos. And
Yeah.
perhaps a good starting point, a good starting point will be to talk about money. Now, I can show you what's going on my desk here. It's just a lot of books about money, all sort of things about money. Money changes everything. The future of money, everything about money. I mean, I just absolutely love money, because money is such a difficult concept to understand. It's easy to understand barter trade, because I exchange my cow
Mhm.
for 10 sheep. That's easy to understand. And it's
Yeah.
relatively easy to understand I can exchange my cow for a piece of gold, and then use this gold, or a small piece of the gold, to buy one sheep, for example. So it's easy to understand. It becomes a little bit more difficult when you replace this piece of gold by a piece of paper. So it's not a piece of gold anymore, it's a piece of paper. And now it becomes really complicated, because you replace this piece of paper by an electronic information somewhere. And now it really becomes really complicated when central banks are creating these pieces of electronics called money. You can't see it. There's no limitation on how much they can create. They can just keep on creating it, but we still call it money. And
Hmm.
now you even have the private sector creating stuff out of nothing, and they also call that money. So what is this thing called money? So where does it? And that's, in a way, I think, why I'm so excited about the blockchain technology. And I think, about, if you talk about new money today, the really important part about new money today is not Bitcoin or Ethereum or one stable coin or whatever. It is the underlying technology. That
Sure.
is the important part. And it can be used for good, and it can be used for quite a lot of bad things. And let me just maybe talk a little bit around that. There's this technology called a decentralized platform called the blockchain, where you can create, well, let's call it money out of nothing. I prefer to call it information, because money is actually information, nothing else. It is information, but it's not necessarily only money. Information about money that you can put on a blockchain. You can put other information on a blockchain as well, like, for example, who's the owner of this mouse. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
mine because the information is on a blockchain. It's mine, or the prop, the house. Who's the owner of this house? And that's important because if it's a decentralized platform, then that information is secure, and nobody can tamper with that information. So if we can create something that is generally accepted as money, and by the way, that's the definition of money, anything that is generally accepted for money is money. If we can create some information that doubles as money, then we can put it on a blockchain and we know it is secure. And if people have confidence, there's the word again, in this information masquerading as money, if you like, then we can use it as money. Why not? And that's why I'm so excited about that. And there are many sort of additions to this, but the basic principle of a blockchain based money or coins or crypto money is that if you have confidence in that and people and it's generally accepted as money, then it can become money.
Yeah.
There's a major additional change to this, and that is happening a spin-off to this, and that is happening in many countries in the world, and it's probably already the South African Reserve Bank is looking at that, and that is central bank digital currencies. Now,
Yep. CBDC.
unlike a normal blockchain, which is decentralized, a central bank digital currency, and I'm not a technical expert here, but a central bank digital currency is also similar to a blockchain, but it is centrally controlled by typically the central bank, which means that the central bank can program that information, in this instance, money. So a central bank or whoever is in charge of your central bank digital currency may, for example, decide, and now you will be getting your money on your cell phone, on a wallet in your cell phone. It differs from your normal app on the bank. It's different because this is programmable, and basically you will be opening a bank account with your central bank. But the central bank, since it is programmable, the central bank may decide that we are drinking too much in this country. So from now on, they will program money to limit how much money I can spend buying alcohol, as an example, because it is programmable. But there's
Mhm.
a but it's extremely powerful in the hands, and there's something else as well. Not one single transaction, all transactions will be completely transparent, and the central bank will know of all transactions that I do, and of course they will give this information to the revenue services, and there's no way that I can evade taxes anymore. They will know exactly how much Zola I buy, how much alcohol I buy, and where I spend my money, and they will make sure I pay all my taxes. That in itself is already a scary thought. But there's more to that. What if I say something bad about government on my Facebook page, for example? Then they could punish me. They can say punish me by taking 10% of my wallet away, 10% of my money away. Or they can decide, and in fact, this is already happening. They can decide, listen, I've been naughty, I've been saying bad things about government, and now I'm not allowed to buy a plane ticket anymore. So really, this is extremely powerful stuff. This is
Yeah.
Big Brother on steroids. Something like a central bank digital currency in the hands of politicians. Fortunately, and I think, by the way, it's a reality already in many countries, and we're going to see more of that. And I've got an idea how the thing is going to pan out. I think eventually smaller currencies like the rand that we have and many of these currencies in Africa, for example, in many other smaller countries and economies, I think many of those currencies are simply going to disappear. I think money in future will specialize on certain things. You will save money in one kind of money. Your savings will be in one currency, while you spend money in another kind of currency. You can't buy bread with Bitcoin. The transaction cost is too high. It's too expensive to do that,
Yeah.
as an example. And I also think that we will see more and more of private sector digital currencies, and of course also more central bank digital currencies. And the nature of finance is going to change. And I think eventually banking, at least banking the way we understand banking, is going to change, and the way we understand banks today are going to disappear. Because typically a bank is an intermediary between a saver and a borrower. And if I open a bank account, if I open a central bank digital currency wallet, basically what I will get is a bank account with the central bank, which I don't have
Mhm.
currently. So there are huge changes on its way and already happening in the world of finance. It's going to look completely and totally different. And of course, and I'm very excited about that, I can tell you that. But of course, we have to be aware of the pitfalls and the dangers here. And the biggest danger I see is for politicians and people in authority misusing this technology. But fortunately, the private sector is always quicker, and the private sector has always got something new that they will implement to make sure that politicians don't misuse the power. They always try to misuse their power. But I'm so excited about the world of finance going forward. And if I can give some advice to people about cryptos, um, don't see this as an investment. It is not an investment. Be extremely careful about your personal information, your passwords and that sort of stuff, because you have to create accounts and wallets and things like that. But I really advise people to go and buy some of it. Go and buy not a big amount of money, buy some of that and play around with the technology and send money to other people and accept money and pay with these cryptocurrencies and so on, because the real value is the technology. Get used to the technology, because the world is changing, and you must be able to use this technology going forward, because it will become the way of finance in future. So yes, I absolutely love it, but remember there are major changes happening already.
Going back right to the very first point, and I know I've covered it already, but I'm going to bring it up again. And we're talking about people. Um, I on another podcast I was recording, I was doing some research, and I came across a page on Facebook, and it was just after the announcement of PayShap, which is the real-time payments platform recently launched in South Africa, and I just read through some of the comments. Now, the comments that you see on places like LinkedIn are very different to the comments you see on Facebook. Obviously, very different demographics, very different sort of personalities, and what have you. As I was scrolling, people were saying things like, paraphrase here slightly, but this is Big Brother trying to watch us. This is governments trying to control what and how we spend. There are shops that don't that no longer take accept cash, so I'm going to boycott that shop. And there was all these likes and comments saying yes, us too. So we go back to people. We look at this evolution of technology, which is happening damn quickly. Okay, if we think about how long it's taken for a fiat currency to kind of get to where it is now, and we look at something like Bitcoin, which is very much in its juvenile stage, 12, 13 years old, and look at the sort of impact it's making. Um, when we're looking at consumer confidence or consumer acceptance, people acceptance over these types of new ways of having money, if you've got a central bank that's pushing an agenda that's perhaps led by the government, and then you've got all these other sort of private companies who are running these things called DeFi, so decentralized finance, going back to your explanation a little bit earlier on, that sit outside of central banks, sit outside of country economics. Do you see there being a big play for that decentralized part of the market again for a certain demographic, or do you see that being outlawed and it being kind of curtailed by the central banks and the other powers that be, globally?
Yeah, I did mention earlier that I cut my teeth in the financial markets by trading on the capital market.
Yeah.
And of course, you buy and sell stuff, and you buy relatively large amounts of money. So you trade in even for yourself sometimes. And I can remember there was one day I made so much money. I was absolutely a super guy, because I couldn't do anything wrong one specific day, and the next day I lost everything, and I had to go to the bank to see if I can get a loan. But the point I want to make is that on this capital market, what I've learned, something very important, is that if you want everybody to know about something, you will go to your best friend on the capital market and you tell him, listen, you've got this sensitive information, but please keep it for yourself. And I promise you, the next moment, everybody will know about that, because there's money to be made. So there's no secret organization somewhere. There's no, of course, I'm sure there are many secret organizations. There are people sitting in smoke-filled rooms somewhere. But the point I want to make, there's nobody that's in charge of this whole thing. There's no cabal somewhere that is wanting to enslave. Maybe there are, but they're certainly not going to be successful in enslaving the whole world. There's no uh, and there are many names going around, and we can even mention some of these names with a plan of enslaving the world population by issuing some world cryptocurrency, for example. That's just not true. It's just a lot of nonsense. And the reason why is because there are just too many of us. There are 9 billion of us. And we're all trying to make a little bit of money here and there. And it's impossible to herd 8 billion cats. You're just not going to do that. So yes, certainly politicians as a group in South Africa, without a doubt, they want to consolidate power. They want to centralize power. They want to grab more power. That's what politicians do, and in a way, that's what businesses do as well. Businesses want to make more money. They want to businessmen want to expand their own little empires, and you get these amazing businesses, and the next day they're gone and they're replaced by something else. That is the nature of economies. Economies go up and down, driven by the profit motive, driven by egos sometimes or whatever. But there's no one single organization that's planning to. It like makes me think of Pinky and the Brain. This cartoon thing where
Yeah.
every day they will wake up and decide that they're going to take over the world, and every day they do not succeed. There's no such organization. There's no such huge power somewhere behind the scenes. But yes, there's always things are always changing. That is the one thing that I'm sure about always. There will always be politicians and businessmen and individuals, you and I, trying to find our little place in the sun. And nobody is strong enough or big enough, and nobody can actually come in a position where they amass so much power that they can actually rule the world. No, I don't believe in all these conspiracy theories and nonsense. No.
Well, Dawie, I'm pleased you put that to rest. I've got another question just on the same topic, which is where should people go for advice, financial advice? Okay, and I'm not suggesting we give any at all.
Yeah.
I love cryptos very much the same as you in terms of its utility and how it's going to change money. And I'm on TikTok and all these types of channels, and you flick through and you just see these people saying, "Oh, this coin's going to do this, and give it a week, and put all your money in it, and it's going to explode, and we're in the next bull run." And people
Yeah.
get really misled by listening to people who don't understand what they're talking about. Where does someone go? And I'm talking, this is anyone from, someone who is maybe just finished varsity to, the CEO of a business that's just about to exit, and they want to do something with their money, obviously very different stages of their
Yeah.
lives. Who do they go and talk to?
Okay, I think there are two angles here to this one. Let me get to your actual question a little bit later. Let me just make a comment first about the nature of economies. If you look at where we were 10,000 years ago, 50,000, 100,000 years ago, 100 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever, you will see that the world is changing. Things are changing. And economists typically will compartmentalize the economy in the primary part, the secondary part, and the advanced part, the tertiary part. And if you try to do that today, it's much more difficult to do that today. And the reason why is because things are becoming more and more technologically driven, and things are becoming more focused on service delivery. And if I can use the word, things are becoming more digitizable, if there's such a word.
Yep.
And what you and I,
Mhm.
what we are doing here, is a very good example of that. If you go back 100 years ago in South Africa, about 70% of people worked in either mining or in agriculture today. And today there's a tiny portion of the population working there. And even people that are working in agriculture today, they are not real farmers like 100 years ago because they make use of drones, they make use of all sort of things,
Automated
genetic
vehicles, yeah.
engineering and all sort of things. So
Yeah.
they also part of the advanced part of the economy. So that's a very important point, and that is that it doesn't matter where you work today, as long as you realize that it's technologically driven, and you have to make sure that you can participate in this wonderful new economy, and that means that you
Mhm.
must have the necessary skills. So that's thing
Yep.
that you have to understand. You must have the skills. South Africa's got special challenges. It's a dangerous place. So make sure you're physically safe. But as long as you're physically safe and you've got a good internet connection, then it doesn't matter where you live in the world because you can still participate in this wonderful, more advanced, technologically driven world. And it will become more technologically driven. And I've got some industries that I particularly like. And I've mentioned some of them already, agriculture and finance, by the way. Coming back to your question about the financial advice. Well, first of all, understand what's going on. And I've just given you an example. Make sure you have the skills, read a lot, and remember you can never stop learning. You must always make sure that you know what's going on in the world. You don't have to become an expert about everything, but make sure you know at least what is going on, especially in your specific industry in which you are working. And then when it comes to finances specific, the biggest, there are a couple of dangers and a couple of things that you have to be aware of. Your biggest challenge when it comes to finance is finding the right person to give you financial advice. That is the biggest
Yeah.
danger, finding the right person. Now, I'm an asset manager. I take people's money and I make decision on their behalf, and I invest their money in certain places. That's what I do, and that is a and I astutely aware of my responsibility here. Because people will come to me and they will give me their life savings, and it's my job to make sure that their money, at least they get back what they gave me, something, and to try to invest it in a certain manner. So first of all, remember that you should be able to generate a better income for yourself than what an asset manager can do. Because an asset manager, he's not in your industry. He's probably not going to take the kind of risk that you are taking. You understand your risk better in your industry, and you're probably going to make more money using your own money in your own industry. So that's all good and well. So don't expect the asset manager to do better. That's not why you give money to an asset manager. An asset manager is not supposed to make you rich. Asset manager is supposed to keep you rich. You become rich by it's your job to become wealthy. But make sure you
Okay.
understand. You must that pick, that decision on who to trust, that's a crucial decision. And you do that by talking to the specific individual that's supposed to give you financial advice. Ask him about, go and speak to his clients, make sure he's got the necessary, if that's important to you, qualifications and registrations and everything that goes with that. So you have to, that is your biggest, most important decision that you're going to make ever in your life. Once you've made that decision, then a couple of odds and ends that can follow, and a couple of other potential threats that you have to be aware of. To get a little bit more specific, I like to diversify portfolios quite a lot. So put money in different pots. Don't put all your money in one pot. I like to take a lot of money out of the country. I have major issues with South Africa. We can talk about that. We are heading for some serious problems in South Africa. We've got a government that is a horrible, destructive force in South Africa. They're causing immense damage to the South African economy, and we're heading for some real difficulty. So that's part of the reason. But there are other reasons as well. Like, for example, there are more opportunities internationally. So I like to take money abroad. So diversify internationally as well. If you do diversify internationally, don't just go and open a bank account somewhere and put some money in there. Make sure you make use of the correct structures. And that's another something that you have to be aware of. You can't, make sure that you have the right trust in companies or whatever the case might be. And again, you need experts to advise you on what to do there. But in the end, I guess, if you're well informed, and I can tell you literally every day, I get emails from people telling me that they gave money to a guy. There were instances where people even ask me that they like what I'm telling them. They would like me to look after their money. They would transfer the money into my personal bank account. I mean,
Yeah.
you can't do stuff like that. Be
No.
careful with cryptos and that sort of stuff. But remember, an asset manager or financial advisor is not there to make you wealthy. He's there to keep you wealthy. Make sure that pick the right person to look after your finances. Don't go after hot tips. If there's a hot tip somewhere, then remember, very clever people would have utilized that already. So it's unlikely that you're going to, it can happen sometimes. You come across something that gives you a wonderful return, but that's really the exception. That's not the rule. If you want to have a portfolio that does well, it's a portfolio that does well consistently over time. So it's the time in the market. It takes a long time to build up a proper portfolio. And I've seen so many stories. I can keep you busy for days about the stories that
Sure.
people come and cry and tell me about how they lost money on this and that and the other. So make sure that you do business with the right people. I guess that's the most important advice.
Dawie, You quite eloquently described, perhaps your maybe disdain is too strong a word, but and I'm not going to get into politics, but what's happening here in South Africa. Can you talk us through this grey listing? Right. So, how did it come about? What does it mean, and what are the repercussions for businesses and consumers here in South Africa?
Yeah. Okay, let's just understand what it means and why we have some measures that have been put in place between countries. There's a lot of crime internationally, a lot of money that flows internationally. People sell drugs or sell people or whatever somewhere, and they want to wash this money. They want to put it into the system, and we don't want that. We don't want criminals. We want to make life difficult for criminals. So money that the source of this money is from some sort of criminal activity, we want to be able to identify that, and we want to prevent that money from entering the system. Something else, we also don't want money to be sent to terrorist organizations. But of course, there's a lot of politics involved here because one guy's terrorist is another guy's freedom fighter. But generally, we don't want money to end up in the hands of bad people. Then there's a third thing. We also want everybody to pay their fair share of taxes. Now, I've got a bit of a problem there because what is fair and how much taxes should you be able? But those are the three main reasons why there are rules between countries. So if I send money from country A to country B, then country B wants to make sure that this money is clean money. It doesn't come from terrorist organizations or to terrorist organizations or from crime or tax evasion or whatever the case may be. So there are certain rules, including in South Africa. So if you want to open a bank account in South Africa, you have to show them, you have to prove where you stay, you have to give them your tax number, and you have to give them all sort of information. It's called the so-called FICA information. So they FICA you, and then they open a bank account for you, and there are some additional rules. Like for example, in my case, I'm not allowed to take more than 20,000 rand cash from an individual. I don't take any cash anyway. So banks are not allowed to take an amount of cash from individuals unless they're sure that this money comes from a supermarket, argument's sake. So they have to make
Right.
sure that it's clean money. So within in South Africa, we've got also the rules. Then between countries, there are rules. The countries want to make sure that this is clean money. And there are certain things that you need to do. And if you do all these sort of things and everybody is happy with that, then you are on a clean list. But if they're not happy with the way you're doing things, then you can move down to the so-called grey list. And in a case,
Hmm.
and that's where South Africa is at the moment. And a grey list simply means, and I do a lot of business with international banks, it means
Yeah.
we can still do business with international banks, but now we have to provide them with more information. Previously, if I tell a bank internationally that I know this client, I've checked this client, this money is clean money, now they want more proof for that. So they're not taking my word for it anymore. That means I have to get more paper, more red tape, and my client gets angry at me, and the other bank gets angry because there's more admin to this, and quite often the other bank will simply say, listen, this is too much trouble, I don't want to do business with you at all. So grey listing means it becomes more difficult to do business internationally and locally, by the way, but
Hmm.
internationally. And eventually you could end up on the so-called blacklist. And there are countries on the blacklist, like North Korea, as an example. And Russia, in a way, is also on the blacklist where you're not allowed to do business whatsoever with those kind of countries. And that's where South Africa is at the moment. We are on a grey list, making it difficult for us to do business internationally. And we need to put a lot of more measures in place before those other countries are happy with the way we do business and before they are satisfied that they can actually trust us again. Because it is in the end about trust. They don't really trust that we do a proper job. And in fact, I know of cases where in South Africa where money was transferred to terrorist organizations, by the way. And that's part of the reason why South Africa has been put on this grey list. But it makes life difficult for the financial sector, and eventually it undermines economic growth. So the sooner we're off this grey list, the better.
And what does this mean to people listening to this that have businesses that have an international flavour to them, want to expand internationally, or perhaps want to sell internationally and collect funds here in South Africa? Does that make that process of money flow actually difficult? Because obviously we have to go through exchange controls here in South Africa with SARB and what have you every time you receive an overseas payment. Is that now more complicated and takes longer
Exactly.
to receive the money to clear?
Exactly that.
Yeah.
Makes life just more complicated and more difficult and more expensive because it's expensive all this red tape and all of that.
Yeah.
And that is quite often what you find is many people emigrate. because of that, especially business people. They say, listen, but I don't want to convince another bank that they can trust me. I'm rather going to move and buy a residency in Mauritius, or buy a residency in Malta, or and there are many places where you can actually buy permanent residence if you've got the
Yeah.
money, and move my business there. It's just less trouble. So yes, it just makes life more complicated if you are apart from other issues. We've got some major other issues in South Africa as well. We're losing rich people, we're losing entrepreneurs, we're losing taxpayers because of things like, for example, the grey list.
Well, I think there's other factors as well, which perhaps we don't need to go into now. I'm sure people can do their own research. Dawie, before we go, I know at the beginning you said I'm probably going to ask you some predictions. I'm not going to use the word predictions, but I'm going to use I don't know another term that I can't think of right now. But if we wind the clock forward and you've got your little crystal ball and you gaze into it, from a South Africa's perspective, we've obviously got elections coming up next year. Do you see the economy improving in the short to medium term or into the long term, or do you think this is going to be quite a
No,
bumpy ride for South Africa for the next 5, 10 years?
I'm very concerned about South Africa. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to start with politics, and that is that the ANC has caused immense damage to this country at various levels. I'll get to that just now. But the ANC is probably going to be in government again after next year's elections. Maybe they're going to get above 50%, or if they get less than 50%, they will go into coalition with some of the smaller parties, or maybe even with some of the bigger opposition parties. But it still will be an ANC or ANC-dominated political government for the next 5 years, which is bad. So, what are the major challenges to South Africa? The local authorities are a complete mess. And I can give you all the sort of numbers, but the local authorities are very important for business because that's your first authority that you come into contact with. They provide you with electricity and water and that sort of stuff. And if they don't have that, you can't have a business. But the local authorities, more than 70% of them are financially just, I can't see how they're going to survive. The second major challenge is the state-owned enterprises. The state-owned enterprise, we know Eskom, but Transnet, the Nel, the Post Office, just about all of them have been run into the ground financially and operationally. They're falling apart. Eskom is just one example, and we know what happens to Eskom. With all the load shedding, the economy is not growing and everything like that. Then the third challenge has to do with national government. Now, we know challenges on education and the police and everything else, but as an economist, I look at the finances of the national government. And I can tell you the national finances are in very deep trouble. The debt levels of the state has become unsustainable. The politicians are borrowing too much money. And that means that we are going to get into some sort of financial crisis soon, I would guess, over the next 2, 3 years. In the meantime, the governor of the Reserve Bank, his term will come to an end next year. And whoever is going to be in government will appoint a new governor of the South African Reserve Bank. And listening to what Fikile Malula has been saying about the Reserve Bank recently, if he is the deputy president, which is not impossible, we could see a populist being appointed as the governor of the South African Reserve Bank, and that's going to be bad. So we've got an ANC government. They've caused the damage at local authorities, state-owned enterprises, and national accounts, and they're still going to be in government for the next 5 years. And they could appoint a more, what's the word, progressive governor at the South African Reserve Bank. Put all of this together, I can't see. I am very concerned about our future. The good news is that I think we are at the beginning of the end of the ANC. This is a transition period. It's going to be volatile. It's going to be uncertain. That in itself is not good for confidence and for economic growth in the end. So the next 5 years is going to be difficult in any way. But I'm afraid the guys that caused the damage, they're still going to be in government, and I can't see how they're going to fix those three major problems that I've mentioned. I foresee that in a relatively short period of time, 2 or 3 years, there will be some sort of financial crisis in South Africa. There are many possibilities here, but it's some sort of financial crisis. The result of that will be a much weaker currency. The result of that will be much, much higher inflation and inevitably very weak economic growth as well. So I'm afraid the next 5 years, it's going to probably be bad or it's going to be worse. And I'm very sorry to say this because those are just the numbers. We've just had the opportunity, the Minister of Finance, he knows about these sort of things. And he proposed to Cabinet and to the ANC and to COSATU and the South African Communist Party. He's told them what needs to happen, and that's for the state to spend less money And his colleagues and his the other members of the tripartite alliance just told him, listen, there's no way we're going to spend less money before an election. So they know what the problems are. They can't spend less money because that will result in the ANC losing even more in next year's election. So I can't see how we're going to get out of this. The problem here is not actually economics; it is politics. And the economic problems in South Africa was caused by a mostly incompetent and quite often a corrupt organization called the ANC government. And until we get rid and until we fix our politics in South Africa, we're not going to fix the economy. I'm very sorry.
No, well, I respect your views. It's sad, actually. It's such a beautiful country. I've made it my
Can,
home, and
can I just add something to that? Which
sure.
is, and before you jump off a high building, let me just add something to that. And that is, I did say earlier that the nature of economies are changing. And economies are becoming more service oriented, more driven by technology. Things are changing. So although they're causing a lot of damage, you can still you don't really need to be part of South Africa. You can still stay here, but you can operate in the cloud. You can operate in this virtual world of technology. You can still operate it. But what really bothers me is that all those many millions of very, very poor South Africans that are not part of this advanced part of the economy, that do not get the proper qualification and skills development to become part of a modern economy because of the incompetence of this government. Now, that is the really, really sad part. People with the necessary skills and wealthy people, they can look after themselves. They can have their own security complexes, they can have their own solar panels, they can send their kids to private schools. That's not the major issue for them. But for the poor, the really poor, they don't get proper education, they don't get proper opportunities to participate in the modern economy. So that is really the sad part about all of this.
It really is. And I think there's a lot of companies, certainly in fintech, that are so focused on financial inclusion. So including people, at the lower LSMs and people living in townships and people living in underserved communities to try and get them sort of digitized and working within the digital economy, not because um, they want people to, the CBDC story, they want to monitor, government wants to be big brother. But once you have access to a smartphone and internet, then all of a sudden your world opens up. You can start, you can set up an e-commerce shop from your phone, trade in dollars and earn
Yeah,
dollars rather than rands. And,
yeah.
the
And
way
there's
technology
something
is moving.
else.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
And there's something else, and I did mention there are a couple of industries that I think are just the places to be. I mentioned agriculture, I mentioned finance, but another industry that I'm very excited about is education. Because the nature of
Yeah.
education is changing. And in future, what's going to happen, if you have a proper internet connection and a computer, that's what you really need. And of course, the skills. In future, poor people can get access to the best skills development in the world. That's good news. That is really good news because education in South Africa absolutely sucks. We've got horrible levels of quality education in South Africa, but technology is going to change that. And even very, very poor people, provided you've got good internet access and a computer and the skills, very poor people can have access to the best skills development in the world. And that, without a doubt, is a very, very nice, big silver lining.
Absolutely. Well, let's leave this on a positive. I think there are. I think post COVID, COVID. I'm not going to say it was, it had its silver lining, but a lot of innovation came out of that. Edutech, which is a big one because obviously the schools were shut down and what have you. There was a lot more investment that went on. There's a lot more innovation, and now allowing access to people that would never ever have been able to listen to not to say a Harvard professor, but to someone from overseas who's talking about something that happens over there. They'd never get that exposure, and to be able to bring that to life and be able to give people opportunities, right? As you said, this is all about people. You give people opportunities, then that they have the tools to be able to then go and recreate their lives and finances and fund families and more education and contribute more to the economy, more taxpayers, etc., etc. But clearly, we've got some challenges ahead. But it's not all doom and gloom. There are some positives, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I can't thank you enough for your time. It's been a privilege to speak to you today. I know you're a busy man, so I'm going to let you go. I think I heard a bird in the background that's clearly quite hungry. Was that a parrot or macaw or something? Or
No, it's some
no?
chickens outside.
Oh, is it?
It's
I thought it was going to be something quite flamboyant, but okay, fine, it's a chicken. But I'll let you go and feed your chicken. Dawie, thank you again. If anyone wants to sort of look you up, I know you've got your own website. Where's the best place to sort of follow you? Are you on sort of Twitter X? Are you a
Yeah,
LinkedIn guy?
I've got a
Where are you?
Facebook. Yeah, I've got Facebook. Just search Dawie Roodt, or if you want to see me an email, just Google Dawie Roodt, and you will find me. No problem. Send me an
Amazing.
email. You're
All right.
welcome.
Perfect. Listen, thanks so much. I'll let you get back to your day, and well, good luck to the box on Saturday. It's a big game. It's their first proper challenging game, I think.
Yeah, I
All
think
right.
so.
Thanks,
Yeah, I
Dawie.
think
Take
we're going to
care.
do well. My pleasure. Thank you.